This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch.
Welcome, boxing fans around the world and wherever you may be watching from. This is Glove Fist. My name is Frank Lotierzo, former fighter, part-time writer, full-time advocate, and I am joined by former Boxing Writers Association of America president, Jack Hirsch. And Jack, I want to thank you for carrying the show last week. Lee Groves, thanks for stepping in and pinch hitting, buddy. You did a great job. Jack, before I kick it over to you, let me just tell you something. I am jacked up because we have a lot of things to talk about. I saw a special fighter Saturday night, and I can't remember the last time I was excited about a 24-year-old prospect. So welcome, Jack. How are you?
I'm great, Frank, and I know you're talking about Jaron Ennis. Could it be because he's from your neck of the woods, Philadelphia, so you're all psyched? Maybe.
No.
Okay, so tell us a little. Jaron Ennis stops Thomas Delorme in one round. Would you agree Thomas Delorme, a good fighter, but a gatekeeper going into the fight? Would we agree?
I would agree with that, Jack, but it's the way that Ennis went about his business. When you watch Ennis fight, you can tell he is different than other guys. The sound of his punches, the speed. I did a post on him about a week ago or a couple days before the fight. Jack, the guy reminds me of a mixture of some Roy Jones and some Terrence Crawford. He is good from either side. He picks his punches. He knows what punch to throw when. He has great body control. Even though he got hit one good shot, his defense is really good. He's comfortable anywhere in the ring. He never lets punches go unanswered. You can tell the kid's just getting better and better. And granted, Delorme was not a first-tier challenger, but he did what he is supposed to do. He got rid of him. My only problem with that fight was we didn't get to see enough of Ennis because I think he's that good. And again, I can't remember the last time I was this excited about a prospect's potential.
Frank, let me play devil's advocate. Would you agree that first-round stoppages could be deceiving? Because
yes,
it's a case of catching the opponent cold. Now, Ennis threw a long looping punch that hit Delorme behind the ear. That was the beginning of the end. He never quite got his equilibrium back. I'm going to continue to play devil's advocate. Delorme, in desperation, fired back, and he hit Ennis twice with beautiful right hands right on the button. Now, it didn't affect Ennis, but conceivably it could have. You know, a world-class fighter shouldn't get hit that solidly. But with that said, I could play devil's advocate all I want. I'm excited about Ennis.
Let me tell you this, Jack.
I think he's the real thing, too.
Okay. Ennis said after the fight, he knew the way Delorme defends and turns his head. He knew he turned his head that time, and that's why he threw that right hand. And as far as him getting hit, you have to remember something. When you are trying to finish a guy, you are in his wheelhouse to get hit back. As great as Sugar Ray Leonard was, you never hear anybody they talk about his defense. Why? Because he did get hit because he was trying to kill you and take you out. Floyd Mayweather didn't get hit as much, but he didn't try to finish you. He was more interested in playing tag. Ennis is a killer, and he wants to get you out of there. He doesn't want the fight to go to distance. And again, what you say about a first-round knockout, yeah, it's true. It could be one punch and change everything. But when you watch Ennis fight, you can tell he set that up. And even though Delorme, you know what, he probably could have beat the count, but it would have ended anyhow. I just think he knew that this guy is the real deal. And I'll tell you what, I may be in the minority. I would take him over Keith Thurman tonight. Let me see what happens between Porter and Crawford. But I'll tell you this much. I actually think that Ennis has Crawford potential, and he might even be better because I think he's stronger. I think he hits a little harder, and he's a more natural to weight. Remember, Crawford came from 135. Ennis is starting at 147. So he's the bigger guy, but Jack, he's the complete package.
Well, for what it's worth, and it might not be worth much, 6 years ago, Crawford stopped Delorme in 6 rounds. Okay,
right.
But 6 years is a long time. I think the key is promotional entities here, Frank, because we're excited about Ennis. We want to see him in a big fight. And I think the progression is going to be he fights for the PBC for Al Heyman. My feeling is they match Ennis with Yordanis Ugas, the man who just beat Manny Pacquiao. And that's a fight that Ennis would win. I have no doubts about it. And I think he would look very impressive. And I'll go a step further. I think he would dominate, okay? And if Terence Crawford, after the Porter fight, and I have every expectation that Crawford is going to win and do it impressively, I could see him signing with the PBC for the simple reason the only potential opponent that Top Rank could deliver for Terence Crawford in a mega fight would be Josh Taylor, but that would be a while off. First, Josh Taylor would have to fight Teofimo Lopez. I feel Josh Taylor will win that fight, but that's another.
I do too.
And then Taylor moves up in weight, and Crawford goes to the UK for a massive event. That's the only thing that they can deliver, but that's going to take time to deliver, and there's no certainty that's going to take place. No certainty at all, even though that's the plan.
Right.
But I'm going to tell you this. If Crawford goes over to the PBC, I could see Al Heyman matching Crawford and Spence, Ugas with Ennis. Ennis beats them, and then Ennis fights the winner of Crawford and Spence, which I think would be Crawford. And that would be a true super mega event if that scenario played out. What do you think?
I think that's very plausible. And if you notice that Ennis did mention everybody after the fight to Jim Gray, but he did say he wanted Spence because I believe he's the 3rd IBF challenger, and that would be a good fight. But you know what, Jack? What do we know about Spence? I mean, he's had some problems physically and health-wise. I don't know if he is what he was before the accident. I would like to see the fight. I want to see Spence fight. I don't know, though, if we're going to get Crawford and Spence. I don't want to speculate what Crawford's going to do, presuming that he beats Porter, and I'm going to pick him to beat Porter. I don't know. He might pick Porter.
I have a match for you. Philadelphia hasn't had a mega event in boxing for quite a while. A lot of years. How about Ennis against Danny Garcia?
I knew you were going to say that.
Fight. And both Philadelphia guys. It's got to be in Philadelphia. Don't put it on in Madison Square Garden at the Barclays Center. I want that in Philadelphia. The whole city would get into it. What a mega event that would be. And that would be a perfect step-up fight for Ennis because Garcia is more than a gatekeeper. He's still a legitimate contender, but not quite elite. Just that little level below right now. You know, he could compete with the elite guys, and they can't go to sleep on him. But,
right.
You know, that would be a big fight in Philadelphia. Wow. Virgil Ortiz. You know, I was going to mention him. I'm serious about it, but he fights for Golden Boy Promotions. So I see Virgil Ortiz in a way getting frozen out of the discussion. But Virgil Ortiz is a terrific prospect. And the way they did things years ago, like they did with Rocky Marciano and Roland LaStarza back in the day, let 2 great prospects just go at it. But that's not what boxing is, you know, anymore. They rarely do something like that.
Jack, a couple things. I agree. I think Garcia and Ennis would be huge in Phil, and it would be like the old days when we had Roy the Worm Monroe fighting Cyclone Hart or Boogaloo Watts fighting Wood.
Those were young fighters on the way up, Frank.
Yeah, that would be great.
So,
Here's the issue.
Guys.
Jack, here's my issue, though. As much as we want to see the fight, would Danny Garcia's father take it? And I'm going to give you my answer. It would have to be for so much money that they can't turn it down. Because in all honesty, I think that Ennis would be the first guy to stop Danny. And I think he could almost put an end to his career. And I don't think that the Garcias are going to go for that, because I think they can fight somebody that has a title or a little more to gain. But it would be a hell of a fight. Touching on Ortiz,
Angel Garcia will convince himself that his son can beat Ennis. He'll really believe it, and Danny Garcia will maybe convince himself, well, I got more experience than this guy. How's he going to react when I take him into the later rounds? And I see this something as a Garcia's taking. We had a comment, Porter in an upset meeting over Crawford. Let's say that did happen. And it's possible. I mean,
Sure it is. I think Porter's going to give Crawford 9 guys of hell.
If Porter upsets him, Porter would have no fear of Ennis. He would take the fight.
No, not at all.
So that would be the Ennis's big step-up fight. And I don't see Keith Thurman getting into the mix with Ennis. And it's a bad fight from a style viewpoint. It's not
Jack, but let me tell you, in Philadelphia, the Garcias are well connected with all the other gyms. They know what's going on. They know what a bad man Ennis is. And Angel can do a lot of selling, and he can talk a lot of different things. But I'll tell you what, again, it would have to be for a pile of money before you get Danny Garcia in there with Ennis. Let me go back to Ortiz. I didn't touch on Ortiz. I like Ortiz a lot. I do. But I think his style and that pressure, he is tailor-made for Ennis, and I would pick Ennis to beat Ortiz. And if I was Ortiz, I try to wait and push that fight along a little bit, because I want to wait till Ennis has a title. But I would like Ennis over Ortiz. But Ortiz is somebody to be reckoned with, and that could be a major fight down the road between the two of them, because they're the two best prospects in that division.
And there's an X factor with Ennis like there is anyone else. Is he going to have a hard time making weight in the welterweight division? Because he's a big guy, okay?
Yes.
So is he going to be forced out where the competition isn't going to be so great? And you only gain a certain status according to your competition. If Ennis is only fighting moderately decent guys throughout the next 2-3 years, his rep isn't going to...
No, that's not going to happen, Jack. He'll be in with elite guys within the next year, and he's actually catching them at the right time. Think about this. Let's say that we were right. We both like Crawford to beat Porter. And Ennis knocks off Ugas, as you said. Yeah. Think how big Porter and Ennis would be. I'm sorry, Crawford and Ennis would be. And I'll tell you what.
They only make that fight if Crawford crosses over from top rank to the peak.
Okay, right. Assuming that. But he may have to, because the fight's so big. But here's the thing. If I'm Crawford, and that turns out to be the case, I beat Porter, I sign with Heyman, they feed Ugas to Ennis. Now there's titles on the line, and Crawford and Ennis look like the two best guys in the division. If I'm Crawford, and I think Crawford is special, and I will say right now, I already think he's an all-time great. If I'm Terrence Crawford, I fight Ennis as soon as I can before he gets better and stronger, because this kid gets better every time out. And I'm telling you, Delorme is a quality fighter. I said that fight was going to be a rout. And for him to beat a guy like that, Earl Spence wouldn't have done that to Delorme. Terrence Porter would have done that. I'm telling you, Ennis scared a lot of guys with that showing.
Let me tell you with Ennis, just to we'll see what the future holds with Ennis, but the trajectory of careers can throw us all off. A fight that kind of slipped under the radar. It wasn't exactly a boxing fight. It was MMA officially, okay, an MMA fight. But Claressa Shields two-time Olympic gold medalist, unbeaten,
Right.
considered certainly the #1 American boxer in the sport. She couldn't get the meaningful fights in boxing she wanted, so at least temporarily she went to MMA, and she loses a split decision. You would think it would be set up with an opponent that she'd win, keep the name out there, the momentum, but she loses a close one. Claressa Shields, what is she doing, Frank, fighting MMA? Can't they get any meaningful fights with women?
Jack, personally, I don't like female combat sports. I don't like women boxing. I don't like MMA. I like women college basketball and softball. I don't like the women in combat sports. However, let's face it, MMA is a lot friendlier to female fighters than boxing is. And there are a few more of them. There's actually more money there. And I think that's why that she is doing that. I'm not a big Claressa Shields fan, but I will give her credit. There is such a difference when you train as a boxer or an MMA guy. That's why I hate the conversation. Well, who would win? Well, in the ring, the MMA guy has no chance. In the octagon, 8 out of 10 times, the MMA guy is going to win unless the boxer is a very strong person and can punch. But they're completely different sports, and I give Claressa Shields, as much as I'm not crazy about her, I got to give her credit. She did attempt to do it. She's not going to quit. She didn't embarrass herself, and they probably thought going in, Jack, that she would win, but the fight got taken to the ground, and she kind of was a fish out of water. She just doesn't have the experience, and again, she's not a huge puncher, so that took a little bit of her advantage away.
Yeah, but you want to see someone forge a legacy, and the type of legacies we talk about, like big matches, which kind of brings us to our anniversary fight for the month of November, big fight that took place during this month. We're on November 1st already. How do you like that? I mean, get ready for the cold, Frank. At least
this is what our 8th show. Well, I'm going to be with you, Jack, in Florida for 3 months.
Yeah, there you go. I mean,
I leave January 10th.
But Mike Tyson, next week is going to be the 25th anniversary of Mike Tyson being defeated by Evander Holyfield in their first fight. When you talk about Tyson and Holyfield, the average person who knows nothing about boxing is going to be able to recall, they think here Holyfield and Tyson. Isn't Tyson the one that bit Holyfield's ears, and Holyfield the one that had his ear bitten? And what happened? But they forget but that happened in the second fight. In the first fight, Holyfield sprang a big upset, stopping Tyson in 11 rounds. He knocked him down. Was it the 7th or 8th round?
6th round.
6th round it was. Okay, like kind of with a punch to the chest.
Yes, a counter hook to the chest.
It was a competitive fight. Holyfield was winning, but not that far ahead. But he would have gotten a decision had it continued. I've liked Evander. Evander's always been a favorite of mine. But, I just felt in the Tyson fight he had, a certain advantage over Mike. And I'm going to leave it at that, okay, in that fight. But one thing Holyfield didn't have, he didn't have any fear of Tyson at any point. And I remember when they were both coming up at the same time and Holyfield was a cruiserweight. We knew he was going to grow into a heavyweight. I always felt that he was going to would eventually beat Tyson when they met. But at the time they actually met, I didn't pick Holyfield for that one particular time because I thought the ship sailed him by. The best days were over. He wasn't the same fighter. Tyson wasn't diminished yet. He was much closer to his prime. I felt that Holyfield was to his. And
right.
So Holyfield sprang the big upset there. So what do you remember about that first fight, Frank?
All right, Jack. Number one, when Holyfield and Tyson in '84 were at the amateur tryouts, the Olympic tryouts, they sparred a couple times. Holyfield's the only one that got the better of Tyson, and everybody knew it. So number one, Holyfield was never awed by Mike Tyson. Number two, remember, they were signed to fight in '90, and then Buster Douglas, Tyson took the tune-up fight and got beat. Holyfield ends up fighting Douglas. By the time Holyfield and Tyson finally fought, if you remember, Jack, there was no cry for that fight. Holyfield was coming off the two worst fights of his career. Riddick Bowe the third time and Bobby Ches. I believe Mike Tyson understood that Holyfield to him was his Joe Frazier to Ali. And I think Tyson wanted that name on his resume. And if you also remember, Holyfield had to be cleared by the Mayo Clinic before that fight would be sanctioned, before Nevada would sanction that fight. And then, if you remember, people thought that fight was going to be such a mismatch that there were cable companies across this country that sold it on a pay-per-round basis because everybody thought that Tyson might not only just beat him, he could seriously hurt him. He was a 12-1 favorite. Holyfield gets in great shape, had no fear of Tyson, knew how to fight him, took away his left hand. And the other thing, Jack, is a lot of people don't realize Mike Tyson was a great puncher. Wasn't the strongest heavyweight around. Holyfield, who could not hit as hard, was a very strong guy and had a great chin. And he took Tyson to school. Remember, in the first round, Tyson rocked him, and Holyfield climbed over the referee. After Tyson hit him with a late shot, Holyfield jumped up and tried to hit him with a right hand over the referee's head. So Tyson could not scare him or intimidate him. Like you, I always felt that Holyfield would be the guy to end Tyson's legacy as far as unbeatable. It just so happened to be that Buster Douglas got him first. But let's let the record show. When people say that Mike Tyson never, or Evander Holyfield never fought the best Mike Tyson, that's true. But guess what? Mike Tyson never fought the best Evander Holyfield. Holyfield never had a fight where he needed to be cleared.
Frank, there's a lot of hypocrisy, and I'll give you an example. Tyson had a 3-year layoff. Regardless of the reasons, that's not the issue here. Muhammad Ali had his 3-year layoff, closer to 3.5, okay? They had similar layoffs, Tyson and Ali.
Within months, it was the same amount of time off.
Right. Ali loses to Joe Frazier, and there are people out there saying, well, if Ali didn't have the layoff, he would have beaten Frazier easily, which is no way he would have ever beaten him easily.
Never.
But you can make the argument he would have beaten him had he been fighting all along, but no one stopped Ali from training during that time. He wasn't incarcerated. He had access to gyms or whatever. So people are giving Holyfield, more credit than they are to Joe Frazier, actually, for doing something similar, beating other great heavyweight champions coming off of similar layoffs. What's your take on that?
I think the difference, Jack, is Ali and Frazier were closer to their primes when they fought, where Holyfield was 34, Tyson was 30. He had 4 fights back after getting out of prison. But again, as you said, and I totally endorse it, there has never been a day that Ali walked this clay and granite planet that he would beat Joe Frazier easily. And I'm of the mindset that even if they fought in the late 60s, I'm not sure Ali even beats Frazier the first time, because I always felt Frazier understood the style contrast between them better than Ali did.
Well,
with Holyfield and Tyson, a lot of it was mental, and Holyfield could walk Tyson back. He could beat him inside. A lot of people forget Mike Tyson was not a good inside fighter. He'd throw that uppercut, then you could tie him up. So I don't think that Tyson and Holyfield fought at their best, but I think they were close to it, and I don't care when they fight at their best.
Tyson, around the time he fought Trevor Berbick, to the time he fought Michael Spinks.
86 to 88, 17 months.
Against Holyfield, I guess the Holyfield who maybe fought George Foreman.
Or Buster Douglas, or the first fight.
Right. Well, the first Bo fight, no.
He lost, but he may have never had a better moment.
Right, but okay, but what? Both of them at their best. Who would you be going with?
Between
Tyson and Holyfield.
Jack, I've always felt that Holyfield would always beat Tyson. I think he had his number, and I don't care how many times they fight. I think when they get in the ring, Tyson is a little bit awed by Holyfield. I think he has the style to beat him. He's a better inside fighter. He can box from the outside. He knows how to tie him up and shut him down. And at the end of the day, he's got this.
1991 originally, it didn't come off in
and then Tyson went to jail.
I will say this, Frank, for any hypothetical fight between two opponents, what I don't like, it's always one and done. Who would have won the one big fight? Let's say we said best 4 out of 7. Holyfield and Tyson, neither would have swept 4-0.
I agree with that.
Let's say they fought 4 months apart, in their prime. They were given enough time to rest, and best 4 out of 7, kind of like a series of fights. Right. Okay, good stuff. Which brings us another great heavyweight. We like to spotlight one great fighter. He doesn't even have to be a great fighter. One memorable fight on every show. And tonight's spotlight is going to be on Larry Holmes. And Larry Holmes, one of the all-time great heavyweights now, in the view of just about everyone. When he was fighting during his prime, he wasn't quite given the recognition he should have. But now that years have gone by, I think there's more of an appreciation for Larry.
He gets it now.
Yeah. How do you rate him amongst the all-time greats?
Jack, I have Larry Holmes number 4 based on head-to-head and what he could do in the ring as a fighter. Now, Larry Holmes paid his dues emulating and training with Muhammad Ali. Everybody knows that. He was at Deer Lake. Ali gave him a black eye early in his career, and he didn't even want to cover it up or put powder on to hide it. Holmes, I believe, has the best jab. He has a good right hand. He can use the ring. He had great recuperative powers. He could fight inside. He had a great right uppercut. Compared to Ali a lot, but a little bit different. Here are the problems with Larry Holmes. If you take him based on the eye test and what he can do in the ring, he's very high. The only 2 issues you can have with Larry Holmes, one is not his fault. Jack, he didn't fight great opposition. If you look at the all-time greats he fought, either he was old or they were old. Ali was a fossil when he fought him. When he fought Tyson, he was old. When he fought Holyfield, he was old. And that was the problem with Larry Holmes. I don't know if we ever saw the best of him. I think his best fight was the night he fought Cooney. I think Cooney could have been champ and beaten any other heavyweight that night except Larry Holmes. And the other issue with Larry Holmes, besides his opposition, and again, it's not his fault, he never tried to unify the title. Now, I know that has a lot to do with business.
Frank, he was the legitimate champion.
But, Jack, he did not clear out the division.
Nonsense to ask him to fight a Michael Dokes. Listen, Michael Dokes is also promoted by Don King.
And some people were saying Michael Dokes was the next Larry Holmes. They said that about Greg Page. He didn't fight Coach Sia. All he did, Jack, look at his career. He fought a lot of guys that were 14-0 and 15-0. Carl Williams, Tim Witherspoon, Marvis Frazier.
That was the end of his championship reign when he was slowing down a bit. And those were close fights with Witherspoon and Carl Williams that he won. But
right.
I see a point. The big fight wasn't there, but Holmes would have taken any big fight. Look, Kenny Norton. Kenny Norton at that point was still in his prime. And that was one of the greatest heavyweight fights of all time. There was Mike.
I disagree, Jack, that Norton was in his prime. Norton was in his prime when he fought Ali the first 2 times, and maybe a little after that when he fought Foreman. By the time he fought Holmes, he was not the same fighter.
Well,
I don't think so. And I'm not going to kill Holmes for not unifying, but I think if you want to nitpick and you want to find things to say about him to put him down a little bit, the fact is,
Frank, unifying the title is utter nonsense, because the moment the title gets unified, that champion's going to get stripped. It's going to be ununified in a matter of weeks.
Jack, who did Holmes sandwich? He was in between Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson. After Ali, before Tyson, they both unified the title, and they had the support of the fans, and that has a lot to do with why they were stars, and Holmes really never was a star. And again, I'm not going to kill him for doing that, but if you want to nitpick, do I think he beats Michael Dokes? Yes. Do I think he beats Pinklin Thomas and Greg Page? Yes. But if you want to say he didn't bring the titles together,
Frank, most great champions, just about all of them, if they fight long enough, at some point in their career, they're going to be ducking a certain opponent. I mean, it happens to all of them. Look, after Ali fought Norton 3 times, he ducked him for 4th fight. He didn't want to know from him.
But that's after he fought him 3 times, Jack.
But Larry Holmes, late in his career, when he was champion unbeaten, he did duck a Pinklin Thomas fight. Whether you feel he would have won the fight or not's irrelevant. He avoided.
You can say that.
He did avoid,
and that's why Holmes takes a little bit of a hit. He didn't come along in the greatest era, and you can make a case he didn't go out of his way to try to fight the best guys of the era.
I'll tell you what impressed me about Holmes the most. His ability to fight well when he was past his prime. Ability to fight at an old age. Look, when he was way past his prime, he beat Ray Mercer when Mercer was in his prime.
And was within an eyelash of beating Oliver McCall for the title.
Right, and he fought a close fight with Oliver McCall. These were top-of-the-line heavyweights, and Holmes was way past his peak. He gave Holyfield a very good fight. And when Holyfield
Jack, you know why?
Prime,
Holmes was a fundamental fighter. See, that's the difference between Holmes and Ali. That's why as old men, Holmes was so much better. Ali relied on toughness. You can't hurt me, and I know how to steal rounds. Holmes got better. His defense got better. Sort of the same reason why Roy Jones was not as good as James Toney later. Once Jones lost his athleticism, he was not the same guy. He could be hit. Same thing with Ali, where Toney and Holmes were more fundamental. They didn't get hit as much. They rode with the punches. They caught them. They parried. They paced themselves. So that's one of the part of the Holmes legacy. But what else I like about Holmes, Jack, you know what? When Ernie Shavers dropped him in 79, it sounded like a bus crashed into the wall. And he got up, and not only did he get up, Jack, he was winning the round by the time it ended. Holmes and Ali may have the best recruitment powers ever.
Shavers had very poor stamina, not the biggest heart. Okay,
you're right, but Jack, he could have pushed him down with a jab, but he never landed it.
Okay, but speaking, you mentioned unifying a title. Normally, early in the show, we talk about what's upcoming for the week, but it's, we kind of held it off. And the one big match to transition, if you want, since we're talking about unifying the title, is taking place this weekend. Sal Canelo Alvarez is going after Caleb Plant's IBF super middleweight title for Alvarez to unify. To me, it's an utter mismatch. I'm not excited about it. When I say utter mismatch, it's going to last more than a round or two. But Canelo's going to completely dominate, stop him in, 5, 6, 7 rounds, thereabouts. To me, it's not a fight. Nothing to write home about, nothing to get excited about.
Right.
Canelo is on a completely different level. And this gives Canelo an excuse to avoid tough opponents like a Demetrius Andrade, because he can go after the title. He could always say, well, I want to get his title, so the public buys it.
Jack, how can we say he's not going after good guys when he's unifying the title? Who do you want to see him fight at 168?
No, Canelo moves around weight classes. He does.
But he's cleaning this weight class out against young, undefeated guys. Who do we go?
Caleb Plant,
and he's fighting, Jack. He's keeping the sport.
I want to see him fight, okay? Demetrius Andrade. He is
you and Andrade, nobody else.
Andrade, okay?
Nobody cares about that fight but you.
No, listen, Demetrius
I'm
Andrade.
telling you.
I want to see
he will knock the hell out of Andrade.
I want to see him, since he fought as a light heavyweight already. He beat a Sergey Kovalev that was very long in the tooth. How about take on Artur Beterbiev, a light heavyweight? He doesn't want to know from Artur Beterbiev.
How do you know that, Jack? I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that fight.
There hasn't even been talk about it, not even a feeler.
Because Canelo wants to clean out 168 before he moves out.
You know what he might do, and but promotion. If Terence Crawford, we talked about him before, went to Matchroom Boxing instead of the PBC, you never know with Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn might say, we'll get you a Canelo Alvarez fight because Crawford is talking of moving up in weight. Now, people are going to say Crawford is too small. He's a welterweight. But remember, welterweights always used to challenge middleweights back in the day. But with that said, I think the stipulations Canelo would set would put Crawford at a bigger disadvantage, saying, for example, he can make 165 pounds the limit. And it all depends on how badly Crawford wanted the huge payday. But I wouldn't count Crawford out in a fight like that.
All right, Jack. Number one, Crawford started at lightweight. He's no light heavyweight. Number two, Canelo, they had such a hard time keeping him at junior middleweight back in the day in 2014 and 15. Everybody knew that he was going to be a super middleweight eventually. But you know what? Look, I see some Mayweather in Canelo as far as the way he picks his spot. But, Jack, we can't not rip him. He beat undefeated Caleb Smith. He beat undefeated Billy Joe Saunders.
Good opponents, but not quite elite. Good opponents.
But, Jack, what's he going to do? He has to clean the division out. He can't pick guys out off the street that look tough.
Listen, I want when Demetrius Andrade, who's challenging him all over, I want to at least hear Canelo say, yeah, it's a possibility, Demetrius. You know, we might fight him. We might this, we might that. He's a definite possibility, like he says with everyone else.
Who was Andrade fought that's any better than the guys that Callum Smith
no one wants to fight Andrade because they know
nobody wants to see Andrade fight, Jack.
You talked about Jaron Ennis before. We both did. We're very high on Jaron Ennis. But you
Andrade's no Jaron Ennis.
No, listen. But the same attitude is going to happen perhaps with Jaron Ennis, where opponents might start ducking him the same way. It depends. Andrade's a bit more boring. He tries to be exciting.
Right.
And he's been somewhat more exciting, but he's got to force the issue a little more. Listen, he's fighting November 19th. We'll talk about it a little more maybe next week. He's fighting Jason Quigley. That's like a yawn of a fight. It's a mismatch. Demetrius.
So how does that get him a shot with Canelo?
He can't get opponents to fight him. He's tried to challenge Andrade, the Charlo brothers. They don't want to know from him.
Well, they have a lot of him in them, in my opinion, too, because they don't fight the greatest opposition either. But, Jack, look, Canelo is easy to take shots at. I don't like the clenbuterol issue with him. I never know what's going on there. However, Jack, the guy is fighting often. He's keeping the sport in the news. He's keeping us talking about it. And look, I can't kill a guy who is unifying the title against undefeated guys that are in their prime, and he's beating them overwhelmingly.
I agree, basically, for the most part, what you're saying about Canelo. I really do. I'm just focusing on this weekend's fight, which is an utter mismatch. But because Plant holds a title, that gives Canelo an excuse to take an easy opponent like this. And make no mistake about it, this is an easy opponent for Canelo. Okay, he's of a totally different level. And the only way
that's not Canelo's fault.
Canelo loses is on a fluke if he should get cut somehow by a jab or something, and the cut just gets worse. It would have to be a real fluke. But
Jack, how can we put him down for fighting a guy that has the title, that's undefeated, that's in their prime, and everybody wants to see unification?
You're always going to get a guy who holds a sanctioning body belt who's unbeaten and in his prime.
But he has them all. He's beat everybody. He's cleaned them out. He's earned those belts. Again, I think you're being way too tough on him. I think he'll get the beer bib. And let's talk about the fight a little bit, Jack. Okay. Canelo, he is so much better at the higher weight. He has filled out. Before, he used to have 2 left feet. Now he's hard to hit. He knows how to come at you and make you punch and counter.
You get Plant. I know about all his moves. Frank, let me get to the point. Do you give Plant any realistic chance of winning the fight?
I was going to go there.
Okay.
No. I'm going to tell you why.
Thank you. You're back.
Jack, I'm going to tell. But Jack, that's just because Canelo is so much better. But Jack, here's the problem. Here's the thing with Canelo. Some people, some fighters, trainers, and many fans don't understand that it takes strength and power even to outbox somebody. Now, Canelo is at that point at 168 where to beat him, you have to hurt him. You have to let him think there's a price to pay for him coming after you. Excuse me.
Canelo.
And I was going to get to that. On top of that, he's very durable. Now, if you can't hurt him, how do you outbox him? Because nothing you do can bother him. Andre Ward last week summed it up perfect. You can't run from him. I think that Plant is going to try to box him and be cute and try to fake him out, make him miss and counter. But I think after a couple rounds, Plant's going to be looking for a place to get away and stay away and try to hope the same thing that Callum Smith did.
How do you see the fight going and ending? What's your prediction? I like Canelo in 6 rounds.
I could see between 6 and 8. I don't think it'll go the distance, Jack, because Canelo has turned into a killer. He can punch. He's very strong at this weight, and I don't think he likes Plant, and I don't think that's good for Plant. Now, look, I'm not sure that Plant is as good as Billy Joe Saunders. He's more dedicated and a harder trainer, but he's not as good. So I don't see him having 2-1 to beat Canelo. But at the same time, I'm not going to kill Canelo for beating him. And Jack, I'm going to throw something at you that I've been meaning to say. And this was said by a football coach who I respect very much. He said, if wins and losses don't matter, why do we keep score? Who can Canelo fight? The 72 Dolphins could only play who was on their schedule, and they beat everybody. Canelo has fought everybody at that weight class. And you know what? If Andrade looks good and there's a market for that fight, they can sell that fight.
Canelo picks his spots, which I'm going to get to next. You know, one of the things about one fight that I don't want to see in boxing, and maybe you have a fight you don't want to see in boxing. One fight I don't want to see in boxing right now would be a third fight between Canelo and Golovkin. I totally agree. Because Golovkin is no longer the fighter he was before. Golovkin is fighting in Japan against Murata for, to unify the middleweight title. I lost track by now, unification. But he's fighting Murata in Japan at the end of December. at his best, no doubt Golovkin wins the fight. Now, I'm not that sure. He could conceivably lose in Japan. Yeah, I don't think so, but it could happen. It wouldn't shock me, wouldn't surprise me. Canelo after his second fight with Golovkin, okay? The first fight, most people feel Golovkin won. Second,
I had it 8-4.
You had it 8-4 Golovkin. The rematch, most people thought a draw was in order. That was the consensus, okay?
I had that 7-5.
For Golovkin?
For Canelo.
You had for Canelo. I thought I had it the same way for Golovkin, but I thought a draw would have been probably, the best overall result. That's a consensus, not our opinions, the consensus of the majority, okay?
Right.
And
they should be 1-1.
They should have had their third fight. Well, that should be one win Golovkin, none Canelo, one draw. That's the consensus of what it should be. You had it for Canelo, fine. In your view,
I don't know if that's a consensus on the second fight, but I know this much.
Most people don't.
No one disputes that Golovkin won the first fight, but more people thought that Canelo won the rematch.
About 20% of the people thought Canelo won. Maybe he did. It's a viable opinion to say Canelo won the second fight. It's viable how you had it. I'm not saying you're crazy, Frank. It's acceptable. It's subjective. That type of fight was subjective, whether you had it 7-5 Canelo, 7-5 Golovkin. I can't argue so strongly. I'm just saying most of the reports that came in, you're seeing media reports, the majority felt the draw was the way to go, but, whatever. It's fine.
But, Jack, the reason why it went the way it did is because, remember, before the fight, Golovkin challenged Canelo to fight a Mexican style. And he did, and he backed him up, and I still thought he got the slightly better of more of the exchanges.
No, but the point is there was a tremendous demand for a rubber match, a third fight. And that's why DAZN signed Canelo to that lucrative multi-million-dollar deal with the idea he'd be fighting Golovkin in a mega fight. And instead, Canelo doesn't want to know from it. He says, I already proved I'm better. No need to have to fight. He didn't prove he was better, in the court of public opinion. I mean, it was still up in the air in that sense. And
Jack, let me tell you something. Before their first fight, and you can Google this, I wrote that the only chance Golovkin will have to beat Canelo will be in their first fight. If he doesn't beat him the first time they fight, he'll never get the win because they'll be older. Canelo's getting better. He's younger, and his confidence is starting to soar. So I agree with you. I don't want to see a third fight because, I'm afraid? I'm afraid that Canelo will stop him this time. And everybody will forget that he lost the first fight.
I think he would. I think Canelo
he would stop Golovkin.
And Golovkin fought Sergey Derevyanchenko.
Right. Didn't look good.
I was ringside at Madison Square Garden. I thought Golovkin lost that fight, in my opinion. It was a fight that could have gone either way, and I had Golovkin losing by 1 point. But he got the decision, fine. It was close enough where you couldn't really argue. But I agree with you wholeheartedly. That's why I don't want to see Canelo fight Golovkin a third fight. Because
he'll be Canelo's peaking.
But you kind of wonder Canelo's confidence level. I mean, why not just take the fight and destroy Golovkin this time around, which I think he's fully capable of doing, unless two things. Unless, one, he can't stand Golovkin, so this is his way to get back.
Not give him a payday.
By not give him the payday, which is what I would do if I didn't like a guy. One, or maybe, just maybe, Frank, Canelo is a bit apprehensive, says, I had 2 brutal fights with this guy. That's enough. I don't want to know from him anymore. It's done with. I won the last fight. It's over with. I just don't want to, it's too tough a fight.
Jack, I think it's more that he doesn't want to give him a payday because I think after being in there with him for 24 rounds, I think going into a third fight, he would feel that he's as good or better than he's ever been, and Golovkin would not be the same. I don't think he has any trepidation at all. But let me ask you this. What if Canelo, say in a year, were to beat Beterbiev? Now, you were just going on a little while ago about how he's afraid of Beterbiev and this and that. Can I tell you something? I don't think he's in over his head against Beterbiev. I don't think he is, because he has the chin and he's more skilled.
My co-host on the Mac and Jack show, Mac, he is a big Joe Smith booster at light heavyweight. I mean, he feels. I love Joe Smith. How would you feel about a Canelo Joe Smith matchup?
I think Canelo would beat Joe Smith. I'll tell you why. Because Joe Smith has one thing. Oh, he has two things. He has a big heart and he has a big punch. I don't think having a big punch is enough to beat Canelo, and I don't think he's a good enough boxer where he could outbox him. So I think Canelo's durability, his speed, his better overall game, his more imaginative offense, I think Canelo would beat Joe late stoppage or by decision.
Now, to try to project, and this is very hard. Smith would knock him out in the ninth. How do you like that, a comment?
Not in this lifetime, Max. Not in this lifetime.
But speaking about Canelo, if we had to project, and this is very hard. I can't answer this question. Maybe you can. Looking into the future, sometimes we look and we think, who might be the man who's eventually going to dethrone the man way down in the future? For example, had Muhammad Ali not come along, someone eventually would have dethroned Sonny Liston a few years after Ali did. And I kind of think that would have been Joe Frazier, would have ended Liston's championship reign years after Liston first fought Ali, okay? But we'll never know. Who would you? Is anyone out there you could see in the distance? Maybe is it Jaron Ennis? If you had to pick anyone down the line
to beat Canelo,
let's say 3 years from now, 4 years from now, whatever.
There may be somebody coming up, Jack, that I haven't seen yet.
Is it Jaron Ennis putting on weight?
I don't know. Jaron Ennis, no way. He just doesn't have the strength. Could never outbox him. And the same thing with Crawford. I love him. I don't think we'll ever see that fight.
Crawford wants to fight him now.
I know he's good. You know what? I love Crawford. Clean out the welterweight division, Crawford. And you know what?
Well, he can't clean it out. They won't fight him
convincingly. Let me ask you this, Jack, since we're talking about upcoming fights. And we were going to talk about this last week before I got sick and Lee came in. Let me ask you this.
Frank, your voice sounds, I took you too lightly. I thought I would dominate the conversation.
Because you get my blood pressure up and I forget I'm sick.
You said your voice was shot before the show. You had nothing going. I was too overconfident. I didn't prepare the way I
You're making me cough.
No.
Jack, let me ask you this. Does Crawford have to beat Porter convincingly? Before I throw it to you, I'm going to give you my take. I think if he beats Porter by stoppage, and Andre Ward actually is picking him to stop Porter, he's friends with both of them. He won't say it, but he said the fight it's not going to go the distance. So I don't think he's picking Porter to stop Crawford. I do think that Porter is going to be as good or better than we've ever seen him. I think he has the style to get Crawford trouble. But if Crawford stops Porter, ball game over. Crawford is the best fighter in boxing, pound for pound. If he stops Porter, he's the best in the game. Do I think he has to? I don't know if he has to stop him, but he has to beat him overwhelmingly, that when people are watching the fight, they say, okay, there's no doubt this guy is better than Porter, because in Porter's 3 losses, no one has really handled him.
Frank, I agree 100%. Winning isn't enough for Crawford. It's absolutely not. Even to win a clear decision isn't enough. he's got to make some separation with the other elite welterweights.
You mean drop him at least?
Everyone is going to compare Crawford's performance against Porter to the other elite welterweights. Keith Thurman won a close decision over Porter. Errol Spence won a close decision over Porter.
And so did Kell Brook.
And Porter won a couple of close decisions over Ugas and Garcia, Danny Garcia. Porter's got to separate himself, make a statement. He absolutely does.
Crawford does.
Crawford, I'm sorry.
Right.
Crawford does. For Crawford to just win 116 to 112, 8 rounds to 4, even if it's going to be clear, that's not enough separation. He's got to stop Porter, even if the fight is close going into the late rounds. Even, let's say, hypothetically, it's an even fight going into the last round, the way the other welterweights were, but Crawford gets Porter out of there. He's got to do something more than Porter's other opponents. And the more he does in that fight to separate himself in his performance, the better. If he scores a sensational knockout, Porter's counted out, creates a major buzz, Crawford becomes a star. That's something he's not now. Some people feel he's number 1 pound for pound, but
nobody knows him outside of boxing.
But let me tell you something. He becomes a major attraction where he becomes the guy that they're going to want to fight all of a sudden because it's a big payday for all the other guys, okay? That's the position he could put himself, but he has to score a sensational victory. I think he gets it done, actually.
Jack, here's why that might happen. The reason that might happen, I believe, is Crawford has longed for the big fight for a long time. I believe that Porter is going to push him harder than any other opponent he's ever fought. And in doing that, I believe that there's a good chance we may see Porter better than we've ever seen him. Because if you think about it, what's he on, an 7 or 8 fight? I forget how many fights he's won in a row by stoppage. But you know something? He didn't get a chance to show everything he has because in his last couple of fights, once he got his opponent hurt, they were out of there.
Well, he's a slow starter, Crawford, but Porter's going to make him start fast.
He's going to rush it. Yeah, he's going to. And that, Jack, that is the only way that Porter can fight him. Aggression disrupts things. That's why when you were doing the show last week, and I said to you when I typed in that Herring was bothering me because he didn't pressure Stevenson. He waited and reacted. Now, look, when the other guy is better, if you're better than me, you're a better boxer, you're faster than me, you have a better IQ, the only thing I can do is make you do what you don't want to when you don't want to. So I can't react to you and give you a chance to see everything and set a trap. Porter comes out like a wounded lion, and that will negate, at least early, some of Crawford's boxing, and he won't be able to survey him and pick his spots as easily as he had in other fights. So I think that's why Porter is actually, aside from Jaron Ennis, I think that Porter is the toughest opponent for Crawford right now. Tougher than Spence, Thurman, or all of them.
We're winding up the show. Jose Zepeda stopped Josh Vargas. Radhi Beterbiev stopped Jamal James. I like Jamal James. I thought he was a decent prospect. Maybe not elite, but decent. But he couldn't take the pressure in that fight, and he got stopped in that fight. And also, as we're wrapping up, Anthony Joshua, I'm not sure whether he's back in England, but he was stopping at a lot of different gyms, checking things out, whether he gets a new trainer, sticks with his current trainer, Robert McCracken. We'll see. And we're going to discuss on the future show.
Jack, I'll just say one thing real quick in closing about Joshua. I really believe that after the way he lost to Usyk, and then watching the way Wilder went out on his shield, and everybody loves Wilder now, I think Joshua has a hard time sleeping at night, and he wants fans to look at him that way.
We'll talk about that more. That's a good point. And till next week, Frank, the hour flew by really quickly, and we're like, boxing's like a soap opera. Next week, we're going to pick up where we, from this show on, and a lot of exciting stuff happens all the time. So till next week, everyone, for Frank Lotierzo and myself, Jack Hirsch, have a good week. See you next month.
Thanks for watching. Good night, Jack.